Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hey there.
Hey!
Hi there.
We're coming to you from the first day of the TikTok ban in the U.S. Yeah. That's the morning's loudest news, let's just say. Tomorrow's the inauguration. We have a lot of education headlines to get caught up on from the last couple of weeks and months. We were on break for a bit, and then we spoke with Jeremy C. Young of Penn America for our first episode of 2025. Mm-hmm. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, go check it out. It was a great discussion on academic freedom, censorship, all kinds of interesting stuff. We really had a good time talking with Jeremy, and we thank him for coming to talk with us.
Yeah.
And thanks for sticking with us. We're in 2025 now, and we just sat down to do the math, and we've been doing this. This is our 5th year of doing the pod now. So we
started in 2020, not knowing what that would be.
No, it was right before COVID struck. We decided to start a podcast.
And every year since then has been differently awful. So way to go.
Differently awful.
No, that's probably a bit pessimistic, but it hasn't been easy.
Challenging times.
It's been a hard 5 years, let's say.
Interesting times.
Mm-hmm. Interesting times.
May we live in interesting times, right? We definitely do. Right? Yeah, I know. It's a curse.
I read this probably on TikTok, Rip. It was like, I just really want to live in a precedented time.
A precedented time.
And I would like that.
That would be good.
There was also these like memes going around before the new year that was like, we don't have to get a new year. We could do like a gently used year, like a 2015 or something like that.
A retreaded year, please.
Yeah. So anyways, we're here.
Yeah,
we're here. And thank you for listening for these 5 years.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. If you haven't yet, go ahead and sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. It's where you can get latest updates, episode announcements, resources, workshop offerings from Moonbeam Multimedia. That is us. We look forward to hearing from you.
We do.
This is the 16 to 1 Education News Headline Roundup, where we're going to compile and analyze the most compelling stories and research from around the world about all things learning, teaching, and leading in schools and other educational organizations. We're going to stick all the resources in the show notes for each episode we do that. You can find those on our website at 16to1.com/archives. And we do want to invite you, if there's a story in your local educational community that you would like us to cover, we would love to hear from you about that. We're always looking for stories of inspiration and teaching in classrooms. If you're a student, if your school community is doing something fun and exciting and different, new and challenging, let us know. Contact us using our website or write us at hello@16to1.com. You want to take it away? What's our first headline?
Let's go to Australia. Okay, I'm just going to say what it is, and then you're going to understand why it feels weird to be talking about it now.
Okay.
That I also got my apps taken away.
Okay.
They are banning teenagers under the age of 16 from having social media accounts. Australia passed unanimously to ban teenagers under 16 from having social media accounts, although it will not take effect for a year to allow for platforms to sort out how to confirm the age of users. So late 2025.
Yeah, age verification is really hard, especially for minors, because they don't have state-issued IDs I mean, Australia might be different, but here they wouldn't necessarily have that stuff very easily on hand. So,
so Australia debated for quite a while about what age would make the most sense. They were able to agree on 16 after considering 14 years old not enough. There had been some pushback and the acknowledgement, of course, that teenagers will find a way, and they will.
Yeah, we were just talking about that actually with some of this TikTok-related conversation. We were talking about Meta is implicated in all of this as well somehow, but Facebook. We were talking about Facebook accounts and how you used to have a college email address to sign up for Facebook, and many of our peers, I would say, somehow found ways around that even back in the day. So kids have been finding ways around age-restricted content for a long time. So anyway, okay.
Some do argue that for those that are 14 and 15 years old, to have had the social space and then to lose it could be damaging, more damaging than it is helpful. I think there are probably only a few ages worth of kids that would really impact at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, a transition period, maybe where you phase it in and the people who have it or something. But even then, I mean, after everything we've talked about over the last couple of years, especially with, just all of what's coming out about what social media does to young minds, it's hard for me to be very strongly pro social media for teens.
That's why they're giving it a year also. Like, that's what this year is for, is to figure out how this will work.
Well, that's
the whole point.
Yeah, it's a chance to help get parents on board with it, too. Like, give parents time to talk with their kids and be like, hey.
So if the apps do not comply with the law, it could trigger fines up to $50 million. And I read an article from NPR, and they said that, quote, 84% of 8 to 12-year-olds are already on social media.
Oof.
And then it went on to share that 80 to 90% of those shared that their parent knew about the account and or helped them create it.
Okay.
The NPR article, that was one of our sources. It's listed in the show notes, of course, but they also discussed The Anxious Generation, which is a book that we have discussed so many times that I jokingly wrote that we might start getting kickbacks soon because we have talked about this book so many times.
Well, it's getting a lot of press, and it's also behind a lot of these legislative efforts. The author is doing ongoing organizing around this issue and trying to get different legislatures involved and all kinds of stuff.
I personally, like Katie speaking, I'm of two minds about this, I think, right now. I'm mostly on the this is good side. Professionals suggest that if kids don't have access to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever, they could find worse alternatives online, which could be dangerous, and sure, it could be.
We watched adults do that en masse this week. We watched adults quit TikTok and flee to Red Note, which is, in terms of what makes TikTok bad, an even worse tool. So anyway, adults do it. Kids definitely will.
Sure. The difference is, though, is that adults arguably might possess more information about how these things work than teenagers. Or I said arguably. Okay, so I do think there's something to be said that some online communities are an important safe place for people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Could this help eliminate cyberbullying and other concerns online? Probably. I can tell you as a teacher that if our school stopped dealing with all the things that came from social media, we would all have a lot more time in our lives to, I guess, teach. I don't even know what I would do if I had that time back.
Yeah, social media is where all the drama happens, right? Like, that's where all the fighting starts.
A lot of what we deal with is a boil over from something online.
It starts there and then keeps beefing.
I definitely, as a teacher, am I would love to not have to hear about this. But I also know as a person who fits into many communities that aren't represented in a lot of ways, that you can have a safe place, and it can be important to find those people.
Definitely.
And so that's why I'm of two minds.
Yep. And this is the problem with TikTok too, but these apps offer a safe place. Well, I say safe with quotes around it because behind the scenes, they're not necessarily safe, but at the surface level, it gives people connection with communities that they don't necessarily otherwise have access to. Behind the scenes, part of the reason people are so frustrated and upset about the TikTok ban or these social media restrictions on
is the loss of those.
Well, no, I was actually going to say is because of this fight over the concept of privacy. I think what we're discovering is that people, I think correctly, believe that we don't really factually have it anywhere. Privacy. I mean, data privacy. So I think people are like, okay, well, de facto, there is no such thing as data privacy. So we shouldn't continue to make decisions about access to these things based on whether or not they're private and secure, because nobody believes in digital privacy anymore. I mean, there are plenty of people who are trying to protect it and fight for it. Don't get me wrong. And as a technologist, I clearly am concerned about these things, but I also think that people are right to be kind of jaded. So those concerns, when they get expressed, can fall on deaf ears sometimes. And especially kids. These kids have grown up their entire lives online. They don't really have a concept of the before times of data privacy. So Australia's taking a stab at it. I'm interested to see what happens. I think teens will find a way. I think they will find something to scratch the itch. I do want tech companies to be held responsible for their handling of data, and especially the data of minors, of course. I hope that this forces these tech companies to think about who is on the app, and I would hope that somebody like Facebook would say that it's not built for 12-year-olds, right? But the fact is that maybe they think they are. I'm actually hopeful that some of these movements, like the social media ban in Australia, like the TikTok ban here, I'm hoping that some of these things force people to become re-engaged with the conversation around like data privacy at the legislative level. I mean, Europe has taken some steps along these lines that other places haven't, but the EU's privacy regulations are a bit stronger than what we have here, but it's still truly just a mess and a patchwork, and it's just this brave new world that nobody knows how to really legislate, I think. And the commercial interests here are obscene, and they're in the driver's seat. Yeah, I want kids' mental health to be okay. Like for me, that's the overriding factor, is like what this social media does to teenage mental health, and it's not great. All right, so now we're going to talk about a couple of topics related to college admissions. And the first one is a follow-up from one of our earlier episodes, and we're going to talk about Rick Singer. Rick Singer is the Fire Festival 2 of the college admissions world, and that's because the Disgraced admissions advisor, and again, we covered this story in our Varsity Blues scandal episode. He was apparently reviewing college essays from his federal prison camp in Florida as he served time for 4 criminal convictions.
What else do you have time for?
Yeah, I mean, what a great way to pass the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Those criminal convictions included racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government, and obstruction of justice.
Yeah, so light work.
So his new venture is called ID Future Stars, and he continues to offer college admissions consulting to families of college-bound students. Despite his continued insistence that his activities constituted, quote, victimless crimes, unquote. The company's website includes a section where Singer acknowledges his shady past, and I thought this was pretty interesting. He says, quote, "I am not afraid to tell people who I am and that I made a mistake, took full responsibility, and want to share my expertise, passion, and desire to help shape our next generation's leaders by helping each find a college and career that is the right choice for each individual." End quote.
Those are a lot of words.
That could have used an English teacher to review it.
It's too bad he didn't spend more time working on that phrase while in the slammer for racketeering charges.
He actually sounds kind of nervous in this explanation.
I cannot imagine writing this guy a check.
So anyway,
I cannot imagine.
Watch out if you're college bound
and
you're looking for a college consulting company. Just keep in mind that one.
Who better than someone that was found guilty of defrauding the United States government and obstructing the justice?
And then I also wanted to talk about direct admissions. This is not so much a news item, but something that I hadn't heard about until relatively recently, but you know all about it. So can you tell us, what is direct admissions? How's it entering the college admissions cycle?
It's probably becoming a phrase that you're hearing, especially if you're anywhere near teenagers or if you have a student in your life who's considering the next step. Essentially what happens is students provide the relevant info to be considered for a college. Your GPA, your test scores, things like that. On a website, usually something like the Common App, which I've talked about before. And then from that data, colleges sort through based on whatever their criteria is for automatic acceptance. And the college reaches out to inform that student of their acceptance to the university. And then the student can then follow up with the school to be like, I'd like to go there or not.
So you get like pre-approved. It's like loan pre-approval, but
it basically
for college
is.
admission.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so essentially what this does is this allows students to bypass a lot of the work because the colleges are just going to say, okay, this is the minimum. Sorting by those data points, they can reach out to X amount of students to say, you are accepted at this point, pending a further, you know what I mean? Like, we want to hear from you kind of thing. I have a couple of thoughts about this. One, this bypasses a lot of the work on the student end by eliminating things like the written essay, which is changing radically at this point anyways because of AI.
Oh, geez, I didn't even think about that. College admissions essays? Because even though your tools for detecting AI cheating are rapidly becoming obsolete and inaccessible, actually because of data privacy concerns, we've been talking about that. But like, yeah, I never even thought about how would they even confirm whether or not students really wrote the things. Jeez.
And like when I edit a student's essay, right? I don't read it the same way I do as if I was grading it. I'm looking for it to hit like these benchmarks and use these words that I know colleges like. For a lot of students, I'm not even always being as specific as I would be because the tone of that type of writing is so different that it might not even match what I've seen them do before.
Right.
So
that's a good point. It's a totally different kind of writing exercise.
Yeah. And I don't see that type of writing very often in my class. So one of the articles that I used was by the San Francisco Chronicle. And they said that the practice of direct admissions, quote, allows schools to diversify an incoming class ethnically, economically, and geographically while adhering to the federal prohibition against using affirmative action in college admission decisions.
Oh, interesting.
So it's actually kind of benefiting universities in this way because they can say, okay, our criteria were this, this, and this list of students met it, and we emailed them all. So then they don't have to worry about those concerns about using affirmative action.
I'm going to be really curious to see what the impact is on academic performance. And if it has a depressive effect, I wonder if colleges are going to decide that's okay because we've reached more of the people that we want to reach, despite the fact that maybe their grades technically are a little lower.
I also think what this tells us is that colleges are worried about their future.
100%.
I think that's the writing on the wall here.
Going off a cliff, enrollment cliff, to be clear.
So an example of one way a college is using direct admissions that I found is the University of Providence in Great Falls, Montana. They offer automatic admission to students at Great Falls Public Schools, pending that they meet the GPA minimum of 3.0. The hope is then that this will strengthen the relationship between the two institutions in Great Falls and also allow for more of the public school students to attend their college, kind of a way to support the community, which I like. I don't hate that as an option for students.
Does this come with scholarship money attached?
So at the University of Providence, basically they offer these students, they like email them and tell them like, you're in, whatever, let's hear from you. And then there's like some scholarship attached to it. The one for Great Falls ranged from like just shy of 5K to I think it was like 17,000 something. And then as long as students keep their GPA at whatever that minimum is at the university, they get to keep the scholarship. It seems like even within the data points of like minimum to whatever, they still have a hierarchy of, okay, if you're a 3.8 student and above, you get this amount or whatever. Yeah.
You're kind of establishing and you're willing to advertise what your admissions criteria are more transparently.
Well, and I don't know enough about the Montana education system, but I can tell you that one of the things that Ohio cares about is how many of our students go to college, approved for college, accepted to college. And so this could almost hyperinflate that data to be like every single one of our students or
is accepted.
More than half of our graduating class was accepted into college. And it's like, do they attend? You know what I mean? So I'm interested to see what that could do
really interesting.
As a data point. I think it eliminates some hurdles I think are frustrating. And honestly, it streamlines the process. And I can tell you that a lot of the application process falls on teachers and guidance counselors. And if our students who are not sure they want to go to college or they're absolutely certain this is exactly where they want to go, this is perfect for them. Because many of my students could tell you if they were automatically accepted into X school, they would go without an issue. So I'm hesitant. I'm curious to see what this does. I'm curious to see what it does for these colleges.
I wonder if they get much of a return on these invitations.
Yeah.
Like, what is their acceptance rate for these offers?
What looks better than saying, if you have at least a 3.0, we'll take you.
Yeah.
Like, that's such like an A+ for the community. I also think that it's an interesting way to get students into college because you and I have talked a lot on this podcast about how the higher socioeconomic classes or groups or whatever, the more privileged, the more access you have to things. And I think that this is a great way for students who aren't as privileged to still have a pathway to a great education, to whatever that they might have otherwise felt like they weren't privy to. So I'm curious for those reasons. Now, I could in a year come back and be like, well, that was a mistake. But only knowing what I know right now, I think it's an interesting start. And I don't blame colleges for trying it.
They're at a spot where they have to try to innovate in their admissions practices to survive. So
it also gives the students a chance to say, okay, I had a 3.0. I'm here. I can make the best of it. Let me show you who I am, all that kind of stuff. Like, I think there's some aspect of it that's still on the student to make it theirs. And I think that that's good for them. And I'm curious to see as more and more schools do it, if it'll be just like that example, right? That's a community doing it from one institution to the public school. So will bigger institutions, will huge public schools go into this? Like, I would have a hard time imagining a high state doing this, right? But like, those are the types of things I'm interested to see if something comes of it. So we shall see. We're going to talk about a data breach.
This is a big one.
It's a big one, and somehow it's not even the most interesting thing we're talking about in this episode. So in December of 2024, PowerSchool, a software provider for K-12 schools, was made aware of a data breach. And they've been working with the FBI to help sort through this issue of theirs. Okay. So it took multiple weeks for schools to be made aware of what had been hacked, which could include personal information of both students and teachers, and it involved at least some social security numbers.
Oh, yeah. I want to say I saw a follow-up article about this, too. It also involved potentially, like, custody information about children, like restraining orders and, like, medication administration information. Yep. So, like, personal health records.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, though, because we have warnings on our system that tells us if so-and-so tries to pick them up, they are not legally allowed to go with them.
Right.
So that's absolutely...
I mean, you have to have the information.
Yes, because like we have to know if you can't go with so-and-so. Part of the issue of this data breach is that the schools who use PowerSchool use it differently from one another. So the impact is truly on a district-by-district basis, which makes it so weird to try to put out a statement saying what could have happened, because there could be neighboring districts who did and didn't lose data.
I think they also probably just don't know. It can take months to find out what was really even accessed or downloaded or whatever. Yeah.
So some schools really didn't maybe have data loss. Some had all of it lost. It's very tricky to navigate. And I even saw people on my Facebook, like parents and guardians, saying, how do schools not know X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, oh, you don't know. So,
I mean, if you choose a provider, it's it's up to PowerSchool to know what was accessed. And if, the school is not going to know.
So one of the articles I used was from USA Today, and this is a little bit of info about how many people that they work with. So this is the quote from USA Today. The company targeted, PowerSchool Holdings, Inc., has clients that serve over 60 million students, more than 18,000 customers in nearly 100 countries, end quote. So this data breach has impacted quite a few schools in Ohio, like I mentioned, one of which is Upper Arlington, which sent home a letter to their parents and guardians explaining what had happened and sharing that their student data hadn't been compromised. And Upper Arlington is a pretty affluent suburb of Columbus. So they put out a letter almost immediately sharing that their data hadn't been compromised.
I wonder how they found that out, because I was even getting news alerts for this like just yesterday after we were done researching, even because there's more coming out about it. It was, I think, at least 2 different data breach incidents that compounded.
Yeah.
One was through a compromised subcontractor account. And that one, it said that account basically had access to their entire tech stack, like their Amazon Web Resources dashboard, all of that. Everything.
Yeah.
And that was through compromise through malware that was installed on the subcontractor's personal machine.
Part of the uncovering of this story is whether or not PowerSchool has paid the ransom for the data. The Columbus Dispatch reported that PowerSchool did pay the ransom to the group who stole it, and they deleted all the data. There are multiple other sources that have stated they paid the ransom, but PowerSchool has not said that.
It apparently was not a ransomware attack.
It was, we took all your data.
Give us money.
Now give us money.
So just like an classic old ransom note.
Yeah. Imagine an old-time robber running out of the bank.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
But he got all the way home and then called the bank and said, guess what?
But he has, instead of stealing, he has the personal records of 60 million underage people in America. Okay.
Not only underage, though.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Teachers, employees, things like that. So some things to know and take away. Be aware of what systems your school has in place and how they're being protected. If you aren't sure, you should probably reach out and find out. You can ask your district about their plans for something like this, but I mean, I can tell you as a district who has one tech person for sure, and then our librarian does a ton of work, and then we have a couple teachers who do a ton of work. this truly is something that you pay for the service and hope it does what it's supposed to.
Okay, 1,000%. Districts, school districts, public school districts, not equipped. There is no funding to have tech expertise sitting on call 24/7.
At this level, especially.
But that's why you pay
PowerSchool,
a trusted third-party service provider, to be the one with the tech expertise to keep your data secure. Yeah. And you just, I feel as a technologist that you're kind of just rolling the dice. One of the things that I read about this was that somehow one of these compromised accounts, it didn't have multi-factor authentication enabled, which is that, we'll send an email to your,
we'll send a code
thing
to
on
this,
like 6-digit code to your phone number or whatever. It's just another way to confirm that you are who you say you are. They did not have that enabled.
Yeah.
If you're serving people at scale, you just, those are like very basic. But I will also say that we're now entering, and you can hear about it in the news, it's picking up in frequency. We're now in an era where data breaches are going to start coming fast and loose because of advances in quantum computing. Advances in quantum computing basically mean that every password that you and I use, that we all use on the daily, is now going to be essentially a moot. Like it's,
so
they're going to be able
1, 2, 3. I should change.
You
it.
Probably should pick a slightly more
exclamation
secure
point. TE at CH.
But even the most secure passwords aren't going to be able to stand up against encryption cracking algorithms from quantum computers.
That's going to sort them out anyways.
As if we're not already in an era of pure chaos, we're about to enter an even more chaotic time of digital security. I really feel for schools who are just trying to serve students, who are just trying to have secure data storage somewhere to be able to, do all these things like administer medications and make sure the kids are safe and with the correct guardians. Like, these are essential functions of schools.
I'm really interested to hear what happens here because I'm in charge of the yearbook at my school. And this is something I have to deal with a lot, is the students whose whatevers opt them out or opt them in, and what kind of information I have access to or don't have access to. For example, there's been questions about like how we can use parent emails for things or whatever. So this is something that does affect some teachers, probably not that many in many schools, but like for me as a yearbook teacher, it is something
anyone who has to have mass contact with parents.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I have experienced this in real time because a local university that I work with, they were taken down by a hacker, and it was just them. It was like a very targeted attack, all of this. And I am not kidding that I have never tried so hard to get into an email as I have my own email through their school, because their expectations for your password are like 15 characters and then something special and then a number and then whatever and a capital and a not capital and a special whatever. Probably 8 out of 10 times when I go to log into that email, I just have to change the password and go through 2 different ways to authenticate who I am. I've never worked so hard to check an email.
Was it that secure before the breach or
no? It was like...
So they learned their lessons, maybe?
You hit enter and you might get in. No. So I went... Like, they had to close school for a couple of days. Like, that's what happened. So it totally shut them down.
Yeah, it can totally cripple
they
a
have
university.
Changed everything. And so I like am jokingly always like, okay, it's just an email, guys. Like, let me in. Like, nobody wants this email, including me. But also, I get it. So the theme of this podcast is your data is not safe. Okay. What is our last headline?
Okay.
What else do we have here?
Last story is just a couple of points on the humanities and liberal arts. 2 stories. First, out of Boston. This actually broke the day that we arrived there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember this
past fall. I think I showed you this article. And
no, I think we landed and I got a New York Times alert.
I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Here's the story. Boston University has suspended PhD admissions to its humanities and social science programs for the 25-26 school year. Inside Higher Ed broke this story. It's a story called Boston U suspends admissions to humanities and social science PhD programs. And the story's about what the university is calling a temporary pause in admissions to about a dozen different programs. Those include philosophy, political science, history, and English. In an email that was obtained by Inside Higher Ed, 2 deans from the college identified a new graduate student union collective bargaining agreement as the source of the budgetary pressures resulting in the admissions pause. Mm-hmm. So Boston has a crazy high cost of living, which we experienced while there for the conference, and it was just We were going on all these tours of the city, and I felt like half of the content of the tours was nobody can afford to have a parking space in this neighborhood because it costs like $9,000 a month to park your car or something insane like that. So anyway, the student union negotiated for a $45,000 annual stipend, and that was up some percentage from what it was before. They negotiated and went on strike for 7 months. Even though they won this new contract, the university couldn't, with its $3.1 billion endowment, couldn't handle the increased cost. So, pausing admissions to those programs,
I bet those university people can afford their parking spots, though.
Yeah, so that's kind of a bummer. However, in much better news for the humanities, popping over to Purdue University here, they are spearheading a new initiative called Cornerstone Integrated Liberal Arts. This is a program aimed at reinvigorating liberal arts education as a core component of the college experience, even within, I think, probably a more traditionally STEM-focused university environment like what's at Purdue's. The program's website states that, quote, Cornerstone honors free expression and seeks to cultivate an atmosphere where democratic rights and responsibilities are understood, practiced, and valued among the students, end quote, which I think sounds cool. The program is rooted in what the university calls transformative texts, Western and non-Western, which I think is an interesting bifurcation.
It is.
Fraught, maybe, but rooted in these transformative texts and promotes cross-disciplinary learning that encourages students to develop critical thinking, creativity, and broader cultural understanding alongside technical skills. And then there's this funding collaboration between the Teagle Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities that is making it so that this program is being replicated in more than 70 colleges and universities across the country. I am excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too.
It kind of is one of these things that takes like a core approach. Everybody coming in goes through these core experiences, not necessarily going to be like at a 300, 400 level philosophy course kind of discussion here, but you are going to have a foundation of basics that is shared with classmates and shared in these texts. And I'm glad to see sustained, focused, and collaborative effort across universities on this thing, because I do think it's going to require like a systematic approach where we all agree, hey, this kind of learning is important and here's how we're going to accomplish it. And it's not going to override necessarily what your chosen college major is, but it is really important that you have these basics of civic collaboration. Be curious to follow it.
Yeah, we will definitely follow up on that. This is the part of the show, fill in the blank, where we ask you a question. You send us your answer at hello@1601.com. I send you stickers.
You get stickers.
This is from a month plus ago.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've just been sitting on the edge of your seat
pins and needles
for this info that you definitely couldn't have Googled yourself. So talking about Boston, this was after our NCTE wrap-up episode where we talked about walking the Freedom Trail backwards, right? So one of the sites on the Freedom Trail was the Great Molasses Flood site.
Yes.
Where I squealed. It was where 2.3 million gallons of molasses hit speeds of 35 miles per hour as it rushed towards the water after the tank holding it burst. Okay.
Yikes.
In total, more than 150 people were injured, and how many were killed by the molasses flood? 21.
It's such an outrageous thing to imagine. And
really
especially if you get there and you see the incline, you can see why it just like swept the whole neighborhood into the sea. You could just imagine it.
No, I couldn't. I cannot imagine 2.3 million gallons of anything, let alone molasses, going 35 miles an hour.
Okay, so maybe you can't imagine it. I tried to imagine
You did.
It's not pleasant.
So 21 people were unfortunately lost on that day. So this week's question.
Yes. Murray McCrory died recently in October of 2024. You probably don't know that name specifically, but you certainly know the famous brand he created. McCrory was an avid outdoorsman and hated the fit of this scholarly item until he entered a competition while at the University of Washington to improve the design. With some startup money from his dad, he made his dream a reality and created what brand?
We'll talk about the brand when we do our next show. Because I have a committed history.
A storied history.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Okay. We both learned things about New York in our What We Learned segment this week. So what did you learn?
Okay, so I learned from Fox 5 New York that the MTA, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, says that subway fare evasion costs the MTA around $500 million a year. And because of this alleged fare evasion, many subway stops in New York City added spikes to the turnstiles to make it harder for people to jump or to clear it and avoid paying the fare. From what I've seen, the 24 hours I did have on TikTok while this existed, is that it's not doing anything but wasting tax dollars because the same people who could clear it before can still clear them, and they're not actually spikes. It's just like taller metal with like little grooved indents, and it's like somebody was like, no, those are like perfect for your fingers to each like.
It's like, thanks for adding this grip.
It's like
now I can get through easily.
They like made something at like a leverage point to pull yourself up with and then to jump over the turnstile. Yes.
New York does care very deeply about fare evaders, but we apparently no longer care. Not we, but they apparently.
No, it's we, the royal
we. They no longer care about jaywalkers.
Oh.
Because they just recently legalized jaywalking in New York City.
Was it not bringing in enough money on this ticket?
So they finally were just like, yeah, everybody does this, especially locals. So we should probably stop making it technically illegal. So jaywalking is now legal in New York City.
I love.
So you can't evade the fare, but you can jaywalk.
But we can walk at any point on a street. New York, just get it together. You know, Chelsea and I we love New York City, and we usually end up there a time or two a year, and we take the subway. I love the subway. It's one of my favorite things about the city, actually, is just the show of it. And so it just makes me laugh. That's what New York is up to, and that's what we learned.
All right. Final thoughts? Party shots?
No, that's all I could actually ever consider.
All right. Well, thanks for sticking with us, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye. Listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. Oh, she's upside down. She's feisty. No.